In the beginning, there was nothing but the vast and silent void called Ginnungagap. Imagine it: no stars, no sky, no land, no time as we know it, only an endless gulf stretching into forever. And yet, in this emptiness, the seeds of creation waited. To the north lay the frozen wastes of Niflheim, where frost and ice piled into mountains of glittering crystal. To the south burned the fiery world of Muspelheim, a place of roaring heat and living flame. When the two realms met at the heart of Ginnungagap, fire kissed ice, and from that meeting of opposites came life. It was from this clash that the first being, Ymir the giant, was born, and from his vast body came the frost giants who would one day war with the gods. The great cow Audhumla appeared too, licking the salty rime of ice until she uncovered Buri, the ancestor of the gods. Buri's line would lead to Odin, Hoenir, and Lodur, three brothers whose courage would one day shape the fate of the cosmos. When the gods at last rose to power, they waged war against Ymir and his kin, shattering the rule of the giants. From Ymir's colossal corpse they shaped the world. His flesh became the land, his bones the mountains, his blood the oceans and rivers, his skull the sky, his brains the clouds, and his eyebrows the great protective wall around Midgard, the realm that would be the dwelling place of humans. And yet, even after this mighty act of creation, Midgard lay empty. The grass swayed in the wind, the rivers ran fresh and cold, and the stars glittered above. But there were no voices, no laughter, no firelight on the hillsides. The gods looked upon their work and knew something was missing. One day, when the air was sharp with sea salt and the gulls wheeled overhead, Odin and his brothers walked along the edge of Midgard's shore. The tide was out, leaving long stretches of damp sand where the sea had recently lain. Their boots left dark prints as they went, their cloaks stirring behind them in the wind. Odin, tall and stern, his one eye bright with endless thought, led the way. Hoenir walked at his side, silent as ever, his gaze distant as though listening to some inner music no one else could hear. Lodur, fiery in spirit and quick to smile, brought warmth to the gray day. It was then, as they followed the curve of the coast, that they saw something lying near the waterline. At first it looked like no more than driftwood, two logs washed ashore by the waves. One was from an ash tree, pale and straight, worn smooth by the sea. The other was from an elm, more slender, its grain faintly twisted. But there was something strange about these two pieces of wood. They seemed almost to wait, as though the waves had delivered them with a purpose. The gods stopped. The wind hissed through the grass on the dunes, the sea sighed, and the three brothers exchanged glances. Odin stepped closer, his cloak brushing the wet sand. He reached out and laid his hand on the ash wood. The All-Father breathed deeply, drawing in the salt air, and then bent low. When he exhaled, his breath was not just air, it was life itself. It was the divine spark, the gift that animates all living things. The wood shuddered. A faint tremor ran along its length. Hoenir, moved by Odin's action, came next. He touched the driftwood and bestowed upon it the gift of consciousness. The ability to think, to dream, to choose. Suddenly there was not only life but awareness. If Odin's breath had made the wood into a beating heart, Hoenir's gift made it into a mind. At last Lodur bent down, his eyes bright as firelight. He gave the final gift: warmth and color, blood to flow in veins, a heartbeat to drum beneath skin, a glow to flesh and hair. And just like that, what had been lifeless timber became flesh and bone. Two figures lay upon the sand, breathing shallowly at first, then with strength. The first humans had been born. The gods stood back and looked upon their work. The man they named Ask, after the ash tree from which he had been shaped. The woman they named Embla, after the elm. The names themselves carried power. The ash was a tree of strength and endurance, associated with Yggdrasil itself, the world tree that held the 9 realms together. The elm was graceful and nurturing, a tree often linked with growth and fertility. Together, Ask and Embla were not just man and woman, but symbols of balance, the enduring strength and the life-giving grace that would ensure humanity's survival. But Odin and his brothers were not finished. They had given Ask and Embla life, but now they gave them more, the tools they would need to truly live. They opened their senses, granting them sight so they could see the sky and the sea, granting them hearing so they could know the songs of birds and the roar of waves, granting them taste and smell so that they could savor the fruits of the earth, and touch so they could feel warmth, cold, pain, and comfort. They taught them speech so they could share thoughts and dreams, tell stories and sing songs. They gave them memory so they could learn from the past and hope so they could look to the future. Ask and Embla opened their eyes to a dazzling world. For the very first time they saw the sky stretching above them, pale blue and vast. They heard the whisper of waves, the cry of gulls, the rustle of dune grass. They felt the sand under their fingers, the chill of the wind on their skin. They were no longer driftwood, they were alive. Imagine that moment. The first human breath, the first human heartbeat, the first human gaze meeting the horizon. Everything they saw, heard, touched, and felt was a discovery. They must have looked at the gods with awe, for they knew instinctively that these towering figures had made them. And Odin, Hoenir, and Lodur looked back at them not as toys or pets, but as something precious, as partners in the great story of the cosmos. The gods led them inland away from the sea and showed them Midgard. This was to be their home, a realm bounded by the great wall made from Ymir's eyebrows, a place of relative safety from the chaotic forces that prowled outside. The land was rich and green, with rivers running like silver veins and forests standing tall and deep. Game ran in the meadows, fish swam in the streams, berries and nuts grew in the wild. Everything Ask and Embla would need to survive was here. And yet, this was no paradise. The world the gods gave them was beautiful but harsh. Winter would come with biting winds and deep snow. Storms would sweep the land. Predators stalked the forests. Beyond the protective walls of Midgard, giants lurked, always a threat to the fledgling human race. This was part of the gods' design. Humans were not meant to live without challenge. They were meant to work, to hunt, to build, to create, to raise children who would one day face the same struggles. In this way, Ask and Embla were not just the first humans, they were the first parents, the first leaders, the first to show courage and ingenuity in the face of a dangerous world. It was here, in this first dawn of humankind, that the pattern of our lives was set. We were made to breathe, to think, to love, to strive. To find joy even under a sky that could turn stormy without warning. To build homes and fires that hold back the dark. To tell stories that pass wisdom to the next generation. And so Ask and Embla took their first steps on the soil of Midgard, their footprints left in the damp earth. The wind carried away the last traces of salt from their skin. Somewhere far above, perhaps, Odin watched with his single eye, thoughtful, knowing what the future would hold. The joys and sorrows, the victories and tragedies, the long road leading toward Ragnarok, when even the gods themselves would fall. But for now the world was new and everything was possible. As the days passed, Ask and Embla learned to live in this new world the gods had entrusted to them. At first they were like children, curious, wide-eyed, drinking in every sight and sound. The gods who had given them life did not linger long, for they had their own halls to rule and battles to fight, but they did not abandon their new creation. From time to time, Odin would return, cloaked and hooded, watching silently from a distance, his single eye gleaming with pride and perhaps with worry. Hoenir, the quiet one, would sometimes walk among them, teaching them through gestures and wordless intuition. Lodur's fire seemed always to be with them, in the glow of their hearth and the warmth of their blood. Ask and Embla slowly came to understand the rhythms of the land. They learned to follow the tracks of animals in the soil, to find shelter when storms rolled in, to gather what fruits and roots could be eaten, and to kindle fire to warm themselves against the chill. The first spark of fire they ever made must have seemed like a miracle, a gift from the gods made real in their own hands. Its smoke curled into the sky, carrying with it the smell of their first meal cooked over open flames. It was not easy. Sometimes the wind blew so hard that it tore branches from the trees, and they had to huddle together for warmth. Sometimes the rivers swelled with spring melt and washed away what they had built. They must have known hunger at least once, perhaps for many days before they learned to hunt more skillfully. But each trial they faced shaped them, and as they endured, they became more than just two lonely humans wandering a vast and silent world. They became the parents of a future race. Children came, the first ever born under the sky of Midgard. With each new life, the world seemed a little less empty. These children would one day grow, learn to walk and make their own fires. They would build shelters, carve tools from bone and stone, sing songs that celebrated the hunt, the harvest, the love that bound them to one another. Humanity, which had begun as two figures lying on a lonely shore, was now spreading across the land like green shoots in spring. And yet, the shadow of danger never fully left them. Outside the great wall of Midgard, Jotnar stirred in Jotunheim. The frost giants who had seen their forefather Ymir slain, did not easily forgive the gods. The humans were new and vulnerable, and to the giants they were easy prey. There are stories, half-whispered in later sagas, of the first skirmishes, of nights when the stars were hidden by snow, when great shapes loomed at the edge of the firelight, when Ask stood with a sharpened branch in hand, heart hammering, protecting his family. In those moments perhaps Odin watched from afar. The All-Father was no stranger to fate. He knew what lay ahead, knew that these fragile creatures he had breathed into life would one day be tested in ways even the gods could not endure. Perhaps that was why he gave them not just life, but will, the stubborn drive to resist, to rise again after every fall. The generations passed. Midgard grew more populated, its meadows and forests alive with human voices. Villages began to appear. Fires glowed in the night, one after another, like stars fallen to earth. The people learned to shape wood and stone into tools, to fish with nets, to craft spears tipped with sharpened flint. They learned to weave clothing from the hides of animals, to make shelters that could withstand the snow. With these advances came something even more powerful: memory and story. Ask and Embla's children began to tell tales of their parents, of the day the gods had found them on the shore and given them life. Around their fires they would speak of Odin's breath, of Hoenir's quiet gift of thought, of Lodur's fire that warmed their blood. And as these stories were told and retold, they became the first myths of humankind. This is perhaps the most important part of Ask and Embla's tale, the understanding that humans are not passive beings placed in a perfect world. The gods did not shelter them from hardship, they prepared them for it. In the Norse view, life was never meant to be easy. The first humans were born into a world already threatened by chaos, already standing under the distant shadow of Ragnarok. There was no Eden to lose, no perfect innocence to fall from. There was only the task of survival, and through survival, growth. Even the names of Ask and Embla remind us of this. The ash tree, Ask's namesake, is a tree of resilience. Is what was used for spears, weapons of defense and courage. And in the great mythic imagination, Yggdrasil itself, the world tree that connects the 9 realms, is often thought to be an ash. Embla, the elm, is softer but no less vital. The elm was used to make bows, tools of the hunt, and was associated with birth and fertility. Together, their names speak of strength and continuity, of life that bends but does not break, of humanity that endures no matter what storms may come. As time passed, the gods visited less frequently, but their gifts never left the people. Odin's breath still burned in every chest, the hunger to learn, to explore, to understand. Hoenir's gift of thought still whispered in the mind's quiet voice, the ability to reason, to wonder, to dream of something greater. Lodur's fire still flowed in the blood, the warmth that drives us to create art, to love fiercely, to fight for what matters. And so humankind took up its place in the great story of the cosmos. We were not made to be mere bystanders in the conflict of gods and giants. We were made to act, to choose, to struggle alongside the divine in the face of fate. When Ragnarok finally comes, the stories tell us humans will stand on the battlefield as well, fighting not because victory is certain, but because it is right to fight. This is what makes the tale of Ask and Embla so powerful. It is not simply a story of creation, but a story of purpose. It reminds us that being human means facing a world that is not always kind, but meeting it with courage, ingenuity, and defiance. When you think of that first moment on the shore, of 2 figures carved from driftwood, lying silent until the gods breathed life into them, you might see yourself reflected there. Every breath you take is a continuation of Odin's first breath. Every thought you think is Hoenir's gift alive in your mind. Every beat of your heart is Lodur's fire still burning, passed down across countless generations. And perhaps that is the most enduring magic of this story. It tells us that we are not separate from the divine, nor are we puppets of fate. We are co-creators of the world we live in, partners in shaping it, responsible for how we use the gifts we have been given. The next time you walk beneath the branches of an ash tree or an elm, pause for a moment. Place your hand on the bark, feel the roughness beneath your fingers, and remember that, in the oldest stories of the North, this is where we began. And though the end of all things will one day come, though the sky will blaze, the gods will fall, and the seas will rise, there will be a new dawn after the darkness. The myths tell us that 2 humans will survive the final fire, hidden away until the flames die, and from them a new generation will be born. In this way, Ask and Embla's story is not just about the first humans, it is about every human. It is about us and about those who will come after. And so we leave Ask and Embla standing together on the soil of Midgard, the wind in their hair, their eyes turned toward a horizon filled with both danger and promise. They are the first, but they will not be the last. Humanity has only just begun.